Hello everyone and welcome back to Chess Programming Game Design with me. So in the last video we started working on fixing a few bugs in our program, and today, well, we're just going to continue with doing that. I've already made the changes once again, and I've already made notes about what the changes are. So starting off, in the last video, if you remember, we changed the way that our king can't move here list is created or filled up, populated, I guess is the best word to use here. I would also like to make another change to that as well. So beforehand we had this chain. Well, it's not really a chain because it's just all if statements in our bishop, rook and queen, but without this and statement. That wouldn't be a problem if we didn't have to check for stalemate. Yeah, it's just for stalemate that it's a problem for. So to make sure that our moves are correctly counted, we have to also do this check. So if in the valid moves list, we are going to have the move which is going to be to take the opponent's piece, if that piece is on the boundary. But if it's our own piece, then it's not going to be a valid move. And that's the only case when we want to add it into king can't move here. Otherwise, if we added it without checking for this as well, we will get two copies of that move. And well, when we remove one of the copies, the other copy won't be removed and our counting will be off. So, as you can see, what I just do is put an AND statement, and for each of the different check squares, I check the piece in square dot is white, and if it's equal to this dot is white, I add it to king can't move here. And that goes on for all of them, as you can see. The same thing happens in the rook, and the same thing happens in the bishop. Oh, actually, I should probably zoom in a bit, and I'm going to go through this. I remember that you guys want the font slightly bigger. I prefer it smaller because I like having everything in view. And there we go. Ignore this comment, it was just when I was debugging stuff to make sure that everything is working correctly. So we have made sure to do that. You might have also noticed in my game that I have a few extra things up, so this is my menu. We're going to be working that in the next lesson. Don't worry too much about that. We can just disable that for the moment. I've also moved around the buttons a bit. That's not too big of a deal. I think you know how to do that. Do remember to move the anchors as well if you are going to be doing that though. We're not going to worry about that too much, as I said, because I'm going to talk about that in the next few videos. Today we're just here for the coding bit. So next up, this is a change which is not necessary because I thought it would be necessary, but the way that I made stalemate work is in a different way. But you might also notice that in the places where I create a new normal or special move, new normal or special move, in places such as this, you will notice that I have added extra code. Instead of just putting the valid move in, I've also added the is special and can take piece. From what I remember, you don't have to make this change because I never actually used that change, but I'm just going to leave it in because if I do decide to use that, then, well, I don't want to have deleted it and have to add it back in again. So in places where I create a new normal or special move, I just add in the is special. The corresponding is special. So for example, here I have n dot the valid move. Ignore that because it's all commented out and it's not important. Here I have v dot the valid move, and that's the other thing. So we have covered that. I'm just going to mark off what we have covered, and this would make an exact copy wherever we're making copies. So for example, here this is just a copy of the list, and this should make an exact copy. What I was thinking of using this for was when I'm removing elements from a list, just trying to remove this new element from my old list, but a unit or C# doesn't like you doing that, and it just doesn't allow you to do it, so I had to deal with it in a different way. And that's that point covered. I have a notepad document right here just to make sure that I am going through everything. And next up, so I've also made, I don't think I mentioned this in the last video, I made my code slightly more efficient. So let me just find this. Okay, over here. So in our check situation of board method, we do this whole for loop. This for loop ends over here. After that, what we used to do is go through the whole list once again and check whether it's a king and then check its valid moves. Well, we don't have to do that because in this for loop, or for each loop, sorry, it's not a for loop. In this for each loop, we already know the white king position and we know the black king position. So instead of having to search for the kings once again, we can just say, well, check valid moves of both kings, and done. This saves us 62 checks, because otherwise we check the whole board once again, and well, frankly, there's no need for that. And if you remember, we do this because we want to make sure that the king is not moving to where he's not supposed to, i.e. to places where other pieces can attack. And that is that covered. Moving down on my list, we have undo button mechanic. So my undo button, because of how I decided to work with things, well, actually no, not the undo button, this is the new game button is what I was actually thinking of. New game button handler, what was it? Button handler, exit game, but nope, not that one. Other one. I can't find it now. Undo button. Okay. Here it is. So the way I undo a move, if you remember previously, or no, not the way I undo a move. The way I restart a game. Previously we used this, I think. It was that or this. Now how I decided to do it is to use my own code to undo all of the moves. So I'm saying while undo button.active in hierarchy, i.e. while undo button is active, then I just undo all of the moves that are there. Once the button becomes disabled, then that means that I cannot undo any more moves and that I have started the game once again. This is basically, if you use our previous code and you have a menu like I do here, that's not supposed to happen, that's fine. If you pressed on start new game button, what would happen is your whole scene, your whole game would get reset, and instead of leaving you on this screen, you would be put on this screen, just like as if you've just started the game off. And well, we don't really want that to happen because we want our game to look nice. So to fix that, I just undo all of the moves that we've made and we are done with that. So that's the next change. To be honest, you don't really have to do this, but I just decided that I want to do it this way and I'm going to stick to it. You can still do what we had done previously. Next up, I have made a few fixes in the can piece block to attack blah blah blah, this method, not this method. I need to find the actual method, which is over here. So in the rook and queen, the rook and queen didn't actually behave properly for when we used this method, so I made a few changes. I think that what I did was add on this. You have to add this on. And so that comes in, as you can see, we have these brackets to check the OR. And inside of our rook, as you can see, We have not does list contain element. I believe we had that before. We had this before as well. And we also check or this to remove. Piece attacking dot square of piece dot int column doesn't equal j.thevalidMove dot int column. So we're making sure that their columns aren't the same because we want to make sure that the rows are different and that the row is greater than. Now, if their columns were the same, then that means that something's gone wrong and that means that the move is a valid move and we want to keep it in. So what this is saying is if one of these statements inside of these brackets are true and this is true, then remove that element. Because if it doesn't match, if it matches this criteria, then you wouldn't be allowed to use it. And we use this for when the king is, when we're checking for checkmate or for whether the king can move to a certain place. I will show you where I have used this as well again, because I have used this method in another place which won't be familiar to you. So similarly to what we've done here, I have that there, I have it there, and I have it there. There have been no changes in the bishop. As you can see, I have been experimenting a few things around just to make sure that it is working, and I've concluded that the bishop works fine. I'm not sure what kind of font size you guys want, so I'm going to try to keep it as big as possible. And then next up we have the queen. In the queen, again, it's the same changes as the rook, and it is only the changes that I've made in the rook that I'm changing here as well. I haven't made any changes to the bishop-like behavior in the queen. So it's just these four ifs. So that one, and also that one. And because previously what would happen, let me just demonstrate, was if you had this position, let me just get into the correct position if I remember how to. If we had a position like this, so the queen is currently attacking the king. Maybe not there actually, I think that I prefer it this way. Once again. Black's turn, I want to move there, then there, okay. And if I attack the king there. Previously what would happen was I could move this bishop to this spot, and that would allow the queen to just directly take my king. And that's not allowed in chess. It's against the chess rules. So to fix that, I have added the code that you just saw. The king cannot move anywhere, the bishop can block the queen's attack, the queen can block the queen's attack, and the bishop can just outright kill the queen, which is probably the best move in this case. Or there might be another move that might do something else better, but there we go. That's the fix for that. And the rook would have the same behavior, so the rook behavior has also been fixed in that sense. Let me just mark this off. And next up, it's a pretty small change. Instead of having white moves and black moves inside of only my check situation of board method, I have made them class variables. I have made them private, as you can see. I just found that easier to work with for other things. And that is that. You might have also noticed these two. I will talk about them later on once I get to there. Let's talk about this. So remove from moves lists. Now, I don't know if I have ever talked about this method, but if I haven't, then here it is. It's a new method. I have definitely made a few changes to it. And well, because the remove functionality didn't work the way I was expecting it to, I had to make my own removal of things. So instead of actually removing the elements from the moves list, I use a counter, which you just saw here. So I used white moves counter and black moves counter. I found that to be the easiest way to deal with stalemate situations. So if it's your move and you can't make any moves and you're not in checkmate, then it's stalemate. And to deal with that, I just count things. So each time I looked through all of my game manager code. Each time I try to remove a move from the white list, I make sure to also decrease the counter. Each time I add an element to the white moves list, I make sure to add one to my counter. And this method basically handles most of that for me. So if the move is null, then I do this. Actually, I have talked about this method. I have definitely talked about it. So the commented out things are probably things that we did beforehand, so I'm just going to remove them. As you can see, instead of accepting a list, I am just accepting a normal or special move, because in my code I didn't need to use a list anywhere, so I just decided to go the easy way and just use a single not a list. I just decided to not use a list. Let me just delete some of this so that it's not in the way, but most of it was just for debugging anyway. So as you can see, each time I remove or try to remove an element from white moves, although that doesn't actually work because, well, C# doesn't like it that way. There we go. Instead of removing the element, I decrease the counter by 1. And if the counter reaches 0, then there are no more moves left, and that's when I can successfully check for stalemate. Now let me just make sure that I am getting all of the positions of white moves counter and black moves counter right. So that's where it's declared. Each time I check situation of board, I make sure to reset it to 0, along with black moves counter, as you can see. Each time I add an element to white moves, I make sure to increase the counter. Plus white moves counter is the same as saying white moves counter plus equals 1, which is the same as saying white moves counter equals white moves counter plus 1. It's just a really nice shorthand in C# and C++. Also, white moves counter, we have black moves counter increasing here as well, as you can see. Next up, I guess I didn't actually use it here, so let's skip that. Ignoring all of that. Debug, again ignoring all of that. This is now my stalemate checking. I have moved my stalemate checking. Previously, my stalemate checking was in this chain. I have moved it out of this chain because checkmate takes precedence over my stalemate checking. And that's why I have put it after this. So if it's not checkmate, then it might be stalemate, and the condition for stalemate is it's your turn and you can't make any moves. And that's when I debug.log. I just tell myself, well, it's stalemate, and do other things as well, which I will talk about in the next lesson, as it said, because that involves the panels and everything, but that's fine. I update. So this is the important line of code in this. And I guess this, if you want to have some kind of output and to make sure that you're doing it right. Next up, I've already been through this: white moves remove and black moves counter remove. And that's that cleared up as well. And to what I can remember and what my notes are saying, that's actually everything that I have changed to do all of the fixes. Now our program should work perfectly correctly. Actually, no, I just remembered. I did remember. Before I go on to that though, I know that this counter thing, the way I've done my counter of white moves and black moves, is kind of a quick fix, but I don't really see that being that big of an issue for now. If it is, then I might think about it in another way, but we will have to see. So beforehand, when we were pinning pieces, how we dealt with that was if a piece is pinned, then we just removed all of its valid moves. However, that does cause a problem, and that problem is the following. What happens if once my game loads, here we go. What happens if we have a situation like so? If we remove all of the valid moves from this pawn, then we're saying this pawn cannot move forwards, but it can move forwards because that would still be protecting the king, and it is a valid move. So the way I have fixed it, the way I've made my chess game behave the way you just saw it behave, is by changing a few things in my pinning the piece checking of things and things. So that's this for each loop. As you can see, I have kind of removed a lot of the code. I am just now gonna go ahead and delete all of that because it is unneeded, and going to go into more detail of how this works. So this is my checking for pinned pieces. I once again go through all of the squares and to check for the pieces which are pinning other pieces. We do have the pinned piece. We know which piece is pinning which piece. We already have that declared in our pieces, and each piece class has its own pinning the piece variable inside of it. And so we check that firstly there is a piece in the square which we're looking at, and also that that piece is actually pinning a piece, because if it isn't pinning a piece, then we don't have to bother in doing anything. So then what I do is I count up how many moves at first the piece which is being pinned has, and I declare a variable final moves count. So initial moves count and final moves count. These two help me out with the calculation for the counters which I was just talking about. So with my white moves counter and black moves counter, those two variables help me out with that. They don't affect what we have done so far or any changes. Next up is really the magic of in the code. We have, if the piece which we are looking at is pinning the piece and that piece is white, then we check using our can piece block attack of piece to save piece method, which we have created previously. We pass that method the pinned piece. We pass it our the piece which is attacking or potentially attacking, and the position of the white king. And this allows us to correctly evaluate the moves which are valid moves, instead of just outright removing all of the moves. And then we say final moves is the number of moves which we have here. Yeah, so the number of moves after we have run that line of code through our method. This line of code is going to remove moves from our pinning the piece, from our pinned piece, because if you remember correctly, can piece block attack of pieces to save piece. I know it's a really annoying name, but it makes sense. Goes through the piece's moves and checks whether they are valid and whether they can save the piece which we are wanting to save, i.e. the king. And that's that. After that, I don't know why I haven't actually updated my moves. I never update my white moves counter after I do this. Oh, okay. So I remember now. We don't even need to do these two. We never actually use them. So why we don't need to use these values or these variables is because this method already counts for the moves which are being removed, because we made it smart like that, and so we don't have to account for those moves, and we can just delete those variables and this is all that our code comes to. And I think that now we are finished with all of that. So in the next lesson, we can just move on to game design changes, so making our game look prettier. Hopefully. I think this looks prettier than what it used to do anyway. Hope you guys agree with me. And we won't have any more debugging to do, hopefully, once again. What I am probably not going to include in this course is things like repetition checking and like 50 moves checking at the end of the game which don't do anything. I don't plan on it. If there's a high demand, I might do it. But other than that, yeah, we are done with the big part of coding. We are still going to have to code a few things in, such as when we want to open up this menu panel and so on, but that kind of coding is so small, it's not going to take up too much time, hopefully. So yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed this debugging lesson, or kind of part series, kind of mini under series. I don't even know what to call it anymore. I know it has taken quite a while. And yeah, until next time, if you have enjoyed this video, then please give me a like, share and subscribe, and do all of that good stuff. Thank you for the continued support, even though I haven't been posting videos as regularly as I previously have. But yeah, you guys are awesome. Thank you for that. Until next time, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.